Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. This is our fourth pandemic edition, filming in our office here on Northeast Sandy. We have hip news for you and some other film clips we'll be showing a little later. But our first story tonight is about here in the United States. African Americans are nearly 4 times as likely as European Americans or white people to be arrested in the United States for marijuana possession offenses, according to an analysis published Monday by the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU. According to the ACLU's report, blacks are 3.64 times more likely than whites to face arrest, despite both groups acknowledging consuming cannabis at nearly similar rates. The authors at the ACLU wrote, quote, "In every single state, black people were more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession, and in some states, black people were up to 6, 8, or almost 10 times more likely to be arrested. In 31 states, racial disparities were actually larger in 2018 than they were in 2010, end quote. In 2 states, Montana and Kentucky, African Americans were arrested for marijuana possession violations at more than 9 times the rate of Caucasians, the highest disparity in the country. Colorado and Alaska, which legalized adult use marijuana sales in 2012 and 2014 respectively, had the lowest disparities in unlawful marijuana possession arrest rates. While we're pleased to see the overall numbers of possession arrests dramatically decline in legal states, the persistent racial disparity among those who are arrested for violating marijuana laws speaks to a larger underlying problem with the way in which law enforcement often interacts with citizens, particularly communities of color. The authors reported that per capita marijuana possession arrests rose from 2010 to 2018 in states where possession offenses remain criminalized. By contrast, marijuana possession arrests fell significantly in jurisdictions that decriminalized cannabis offenses, and fell even more so in states like my home, Oregon, that have legalized it. Nonetheless, even these latter jurisdictions, racial disparities still exist among those arrested for marijuana crimes. However, the ACLU acknowledged, quote, "On average, states that have legalized marijuana possession had lower racial disparities in possession arrests in 2018 compared both to states that have only decriminalized and states where marijuana remains illegal. The legalization of marijuana is not a panacea to solve the structural problems of systemic racism that persist in America. Nevertheless, legalizing and regulating cannabis reduces the total volume of marijuana arrests, as well as one of the primary reasons for police interactions with the public, interactions that have been historically abused by police against people of color in particular." The full text of this study, A Tale of Two Countries, Racially Targeted Arrests in the Era of Marijuana Reform, is available online from the American Civil Liberties Union at aclu.org. Our next story is from Baltimore, Maryland. Cannabis use is associated with subjective improvements in opioid withdrawal symptoms and opioid withdrawal severity, according to a survey data published in the Journal of Substance Abuse Treatment. Investigators affiliated with the Johns Hopkins University of Medicine assessed the impact of cannabis use on symptoms of opioid withdrawal in a cohort of 200 subjects. Participants in the survey acknowledged having recently used cannabis and also having experienced symptoms of opioid withdrawal over the previous 30 days. The researchers reported that the majority of subjects reported clinically meaningful improvements from cannabis, particularly with respect to improved sleep and reduced anxiety. The authors concluded, quote, "Across all symptoms, more participants indicate that opioid withdrawal symptoms improved with cannabis relative to those who indicated that cannabis worsened a symptom. On average, withdrawal severity scores nearly doubled on days cannabis was not used. Commonly improved symptoms include anxiety, trouble sleeping, and bone and muscle aches. These results show that cannabis may improve opioid withdrawal symptoms and that the size of the effect is clinically meaningful. Prospectively designed studies examining the impact of cannabis and cannabinoids on opioid withdrawal are warranted, end quote. This study, The Impact of Naturalistic Cannabis Use on Self-Reported Opioid Withdrawal, appears in this month's edition of the Journal of Substance Abuse Treatment. Also, as many of my viewers know, I have a collection of antique medical marijuana containers, and all of the ones from 1880 through 1915 said that cannabis was used as a treatment for opium withdrawals and cocaine, chloroform, and other withdrawal symptoms, including alcohol and delirium tremens. Last week, we introduced a story about proposed changes by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration to cannabis produced for clinical research in the USA. We oppose the Drug Enforcement Administration's proposed rule changes governing the federal production and distribution of cannabis for clinical research purposes. Under existing regulations, the agency only licenses one facility, the University of Mississippi, to cultivate cannabis for use in FDA-approved clinical trials. Researchers have consistently criticized the poor quality of these plants, which they say fail to accurately reflect the varieties of marijuana commercially available in the United States. As a result, the DEA has been encouraged for over a decade to expand the pool of federally licensed cannabis producers, a move that the agency has largely resisted and we have proposed. In 2016, the agency appeared to reconsider its long-standing policy and publicly stated for the first time that it would consider additional applicants. To date, however, the DEA has failed to either affirm or reject any of the more than 30 applicants it has received. Under the proposed rules issued by the DEA on March 23rd, the agency continues to maintain sole discretion to decide which applicants, if any, will be permitted to grow cannabis for research purposes, and it provides no timeline under which the DEA must act on the numerous applications already before it. We've long supported facilitating and expanding domestic clinical research efforts. We do not believe that these proposed rules, if enacted, will achieve this outcome. Rather, we believe that the adoption of these rules may further stonewall efforts to advance our scientific understanding of cannabis by unduly expanding the DEA's authority and control over decisions that ought to be left up to health experts and scientists. Specifically, the newly proposed rules expand the DEA's authority by declaring it to be the only entity legally permitted to purchase, warehouse, and dispense any cannabis grown under a federal license. Rather than compelling scientists to access marijuana products of questionable quality manufactured by a limited number of federally licensed producers, we believe that federal regulators should allow investigators to access the cannabis that's currently being produced by the multitude of state-sanctioned growers and retailers throughout the country. Doing so would not only facilitate and expedite clinical cannabis research in the United States, but would also bring about a long overdue end to decades, since the 1960s, of stonewalling by the Drug Enforcement Administration and interference with respect to the advancement of our scientific understanding of the cannabis plant. Our next story is from Augusta, Maine. Adult use marijuana retailers will not be operational by this spring, according to latest guidance approved by Maine state regulators. State regulators granted conditional licenses in March to over 30 applicants seeking licensure to operate commercial adult use cannabis businesses. However, under the state licensing regulations, facilities must be duly approved by both state and municipal officials before becoming operational. Representatives at the Maine Office of Marijuana Policy announced this week that COVID-19 pandemic had delayed the ability of municipal officials to review and finalize the approval process. The agency said that they are, quote, unable to provide any concrete timeline, end quote, as to when Maine's retail cannabis businesses will be operational. The officials added, quote, we'll continue to do everything within our power to ensure timely launch of this new industry, end quote. Maine voters initially approved the legalization of cannabis sales in November 2016 by passing a statewide initiative, but lawmakers, led by former Republican Governor Paul LePage, repeatedly took steps to delay the law's implementation. Rules governing adult use cannabis production and sales were not ultimately finalized until last year. Next story is from Copenhagen, Denmark. In adult subjects, the oral administration of purified CBD is associated with anxiolytic and antipsychotic activity while possessing few adverse side effects, according to a new study published in the Journal of Clinical Medicine Research. A pair of researchers affiliated with the Nordic Cannabis Research Institute in Denmark reviewed 25 clinical trials assessing the safety and efficacy of CBD in various populations. The authors reported, quote, "There's some evidence that supports the anxiolytic effects of acute administration of oral CBD. There's moderate quality evidence that chronic and acute administration of CBD can improve psychotic symptoms in schizophrenic patients," end quote. They reported there was insufficient evidence at this time to support use of CBD for Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, or for curbing cravings with those with substance abuse disorders. With regard to CBD safety, they concluded, quote, "Most studies reported no adverse events with acute administration and mild to moderate adverse effects with chronic administration. In comparison to other drugs, a better side effect profile was presented," end quote. In June 2018, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved Epidiolex, a prescription medicine containing a standardized formulation of plant-derived cannabidiol for the explicit treatment of two rare forms of severe epilepsy, Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and Dravet syndrome. The full text of the study, dosage, efficacy, and safety of cannabidiol administration in adults, a systemic review of human trials, appears in this month's edition of the Journal of Clinical Medicine and Research. Here in Oregon, March cannabis sales in Oregon set a new monthly record for the state at $84.5 million. Business owners, however, still voice concerns about an uncertain future. March cannabis sales in Oregon set a new monthly record with $84.5 million, a 37% increase from the same time last year. The previous record was set in July 2019, just about $80 million. The record-breaking month comes amid the state's coronavirus response, which includes a stay-at-home order issued on March 23rd. On average, sales per cannabis retailer were about $135,000, a 30% increase from March 2019. According to the report, flower comprised more than half of total sales, while concentrates and extracts accounted for the second highest market share. Matt Van Sickle, an Oregon Liquor Control Commission spokesperson, said the sales appeared to be, quote, "stopping up type of activity," end quote, adding that the next 2 weeks returned to slightly below their earlier March sales level. Van Sickle said that February sales were also 20% higher from February 2019, and that there was a 21% increase in March's sales over February's. Despite the record-breaking month, Bridge City Collective owner David Alpart told the Bend Bulletin that while, quote, "the average purchase is higher, the impact on sales is negligible," end quote. He also said his payroll and cleaning costs have gone up after hiring delivery drivers and implementing enhanced sanitary practices. Oregon cannabis regulators have announced random lab testing procedures for cannabis products in the state. The random test will search for undisclosed ingredients and potential additives. The Oregon Liquor Control Commission announced last Friday that it will begin random testing of the state's cannabis products for undisclosed ingredients and additives. The agency said the change stems from last year's vaping crisis. An OLCC spokesman said, quote, "During the vaping crisis, OLCC took the position that specific additives suspected of being contained in nicotine in cannabis vaping products were adulterants, and based on existing OLCC rules, should not be contained in marijuana products. But the OLCC lacks specific authority to require random sampling and testing to detect adulterants and other contaminants in the marijuana products of licensees," end quote. The OLCC in an April 17, 2020 press release. They went on to say in Oregon, the vape-linked pulmonary illness was linked to 22 cases and 2 deaths. A Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report indicated that most of the cannabis vape cartridges linked to the disease were produced and obtained outside of the legal markets. The agency also said for the next 6 months it it will not require an in-person inspection by members of its staff for proposed licensed premises due to the current coronavirus pandemic. Steve Marks, OLCC's executive director, called the suspension of in-person inspections a temporary change similar to rules allowing curbside delivery. Marks said in a printed statement, quote, "We're saying to the cannabis industry, we expect you to act responsibly, and applicants are expected to abide by all the rules. If they do not, they'll be subject to violations, and the OLCC will act quickly in order to ensure public safety," end quote. The rule aligns with the state social distancing requirements, which do not yet have an end date. The random testing policy took effect on April 21st. Well, that's the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. I want to thank you folks for watching. We have some more video from other sources. I'm taping this in advance. We'll be back to live shows when the pandemic's over, but in the interim, help restore hemp.
Folks, everything's been so smooth here. So many great speakers saying so many good things, man. It's an honor to be part of it, I tell you. Sunday afternoon, sitting by that river in the sun, yeah. Saturday market, a few more weeks are done. That winter comes along, yeah, we got to grab the sun while it shines. Going down to the river, relax my mind, singing, hey, that's Portland way. Talk about the medicine on the river bank today. I say, hey, oh, let the river flow. Good things coming on everywhere that you go, yeah. Colorado, Washington to California, it's true. They got a good little Oregon freedom going in this day, it's true, yeah. Think you're feeling alright if we can keep it good. You can overregulate it, you can overtax it, and I think that's nothing that makes sure I say, hey, yeah, that's the Oregon way. It feels so good singing about it here by the river today. Now I say, hey, oh, festival, turn it up in the sundown to the different valley, give it a roll, yeah. People coming to speak and giving wisdom all around the day. Lawyers, doctors, engineers, farmers, and people that say, bring it on, we need more of this freedom wind. Yeah, sing it with me now when the chorus comes around again. I say, hey, this is the Oregon way. Let that sun shine on the green fields with the river play. I said, hey, oh, Hempstock Festival 2016, yeah, living in the city of dreams. You put a bird on it, people might think it's from Portland town, yeah. Since he got that Portlandia thing, everybody's looking all around, saying, I think Peoria could be more like this in that Portland way. We got food trucks out in Alabama. That's what I heard them say. Now I say, hey, it's a sweet Sunday down by that old Columbia River, flowing, flowing, flowing away. Hey, oh, Hempstock Festival. We're gonna get a little rhythm to that Oregon rhythm soul. Hempstock 2016, roll a fatty now, let it all roll, roll. What's so amazing, man, is there's all kind of reefer man, you know? There's lab testers, man, you know, there's soil makers, there's lawyers, man. There's people selling tin cans and shit like that. It's beautiful how it's all evolving, isn't it? I think it's more like it used to be now than it ever has been. I think they're going to legalize that too. For instance, like how many of you feel more like you do now than when you got here? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Well, today about 25 years from now, I'll sit down and wonder how. I'll sit down in the city dump and talk about the good old days. Well, I'll pass a joint and I'll pass some wine. Ain't a good thing coming down the line. A lot of good things went down one time back in the good old days. Yeah, now we're almost done and there ain't much left that we can figure out. I guess it seemed a lot more like that back in the good old days. We were in love with the people that we hadn't even met. Out for anything that we could get. Well, we did it then and we'll do it again. Back in the good old days. Yeah, the good old days are past and gone. A lot of good people have done gone on. That's a lot when I'm singing this song about back in the good old days. That's right, folks, these are the good old days. It's not into the realm of overregulation and concentration in the hands of the big boys. Craft ganja growing all over Oregon, and I hear you say, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we're all throwing hands and we'll gather around, man. The old guitar starts to make that sound. A lot of good things went down back in the good old days. But when you gotta go, you gotta go. Always somebody, don't you know, hanging out saying that I told you so. Back in the good old days. Yeah, the good old days are past and gone. A lot of good people are done gone on. That's like when I'm singing this song about back in the good old days. Yeah, the good old days are past and gone. A lot of good people are done gone on. That's like when I'm singing this song about back in the good old days. Yeah. That one's for Jack Herrera. Well, I'm gonna be high till I die. This life I'm living in, been so very high. Sticks and stones, break out the bones. So you're gonna talk about when I'm gone. Gonna be high till I die. Girls who from Tennessee, just the wickedest you could be. Never went to church or Sunday school. All I did was socialize, having a good time all his life. Well, I woke up the congregation when he said, well, I'm gonna live it high till I die. This life I'm living in a bit so very high. Sticks and stones, break out my bones. So you're gonna talk about when I'm gone. Gonna live it high till I die. When the car began to sing and the bells began to ring, bing, bing, bing. Wow, yeah, walk out the congregation just say, I'm gonna live it high till I die. This life I'm living in a bit so very high. Well, sticks and stones break out my bones. No, you're gonna talk about me when I'm gone. Gonna live it high till I, gonna live it high till I, gonna live it high till I die. Yes, sir. That's a true story. You know, I just got my medical card renewed just this past week and found out that my doctor is losing his medical license because the Oregon State Medical Board decided that he was writing too many prescriptions for this ganja stuff. And I imagine they might have been getting a little pressure from the pharmaceutical industry, which is losing money to these dang ganja prescriptions. Isn't it awful? But, you know, we're going to win in the long run, you know. But in the meantime, here's a great doctor, man. He's not allowed to practice medicine as of next week because he's fighting a battle that we're all fighting, you know. So keep up the good work, folks. Give it up for the folks who put on this fest and keep it in people's mind that there's still a lot of work to do. But Portland's a great town to do it in, I'll tell you that. Yes, sir. 420! 420 long years. I smoked lots of reefer, drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4. I love friends gather around for a drink, but I like smoking fatties much better, I think. You don't get so stupid, it's good for your head. Don't have a headache in the morning in bed. 20 long years, I smoked lots of reefer and drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4. Yeah! I love growing fatties and burning them down. Roll through Oregon up to Portland town. Driving I-5 with the windows open wide. Through the countryside. Yes, sir. 420 long years. Smoke lots of reefer, drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4. You know what I'm talking about. I'm sitting there singing in the bright sun. There's a cloud blowing over there. I wonder what's begun. Is that people kicking up dust or burning them down? We never can tell up in Portland town. That's right. We're 420 long years. And smoke lots of reefer, drank lots of beer. Every day at 420, we're gonna settle the score. And for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4. Yeah, for 20 long years, it's been 20 past 4. I'm gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix on that money. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lean around and Santa Mama and put a good buzz on. Well, pass it to me, baby. Pass it to me slow. Take time out to get a little before you let it go. Gonna lay around and Santa Mama and put a good buzz on. Well, we voted in to be legalized, and someday I'll see it. Walk down the street burning fatties and nobody got nothing to say. Gonna lay around and Santa Mama and put a good buzz on. Well, you can't smoke fatties when you're walking through the park, when you organize the kids that light back into the dark. Gonna lay around and Santa Mama and put a good buzz on every night and day. Yeah. Gonna lay around and Santa Mama and put a good buzz on.
It's the West Coast in the house today. Can we take y'all back to the 90s with this song right here? Dr. Dre, you know what I'm saying? He was the first chronic doctor, then there was a lot of other doctors going on right now. We're gonna give some up to Dr. Dre. We're gonna burn this track. Put your W's out, West Coast, come on. Yeah, yeah. Shout out to the East Coast too. Midwest, Dirty South, we love you. We gotta borrow this track from the doctor.
We switched it up, we did it Pollen style though.
I remember when I first got my medical card.
Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you're trying to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily, G13. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you're trying to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily, G13. A vertebrae in my neck is out of place, a quarter man. I got tingling in my fingers from my nerve being pinned. Lower back problems that I peanut for the bitch back and then. Maybe Percocets THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily on G13. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily on G13. The homie had an illness, man, it made him lose his appetite. Mary Jane brought it back, now my boy is eating right. Uncle took one for the 10 Vietnam. Now he sees in his vein with the water bomb. I said my knees still hurt from my old ball entry. Got a cabinet full of pills that the doctors keep on giving me. I ain't gonna take them, the side effects is crazy. Might become lethargic, vision might get lazy. Can't operate machinery, causes constipation. I don't need that, give me that green medication. Sorry, she be cooking it, making it a brownies. Tell them what we smoking on. Multnomah County. Tell them what we smoking on. Multnomah County. What we smoking on? Multnomah County. What we smoking on? Multnomah County. Section what we know. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated, I believe G13. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated, I believe G13. Got my prescription from my doctor. What you got? Got my prescription from my doctor. What you got, Doug? Got my prescription from my doctor. Yeah. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. Got my prescription from my doctor. What you got? Got my prescription from my doctor.
So you right.
Got my prescription from my doctor.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D.
Ladies and gentlemen, make some noise for the band, y'all. They getting it in today. All right. I want y'all to show them some love, all right? Look. When I say smoking, y'all say section.
Smoking, section,
Smoking.
section.
When I say smoking,
Y'all say section, smoking,
smoking. Ladies and gentlemen, guitar. One of my newest cats in the crew. Make some noise for Mr. Michael Richardson. Yeah. Shout out to all my weed smokers worldwide.
yeah.
We gonna get funky with it one time. Make some noise for Mike, y'all. On keyboards, gotta introduce my guy right here, the man that holds all the pieces together for us. Put some noise for Mr. Lawrence Wind Stick. Make some noise, y'all, for Wind.
From my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily on G13. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Now I'm gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily. Got my prescription from my doctor for some THC. Gonna get my medicine on 7th and D. And if you try to see me later, that's where I'll be. Getting medicated heavily on G13.
Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, put your peace signs up, y'all, if you're enjoying this life we've been blessed with.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well, let me hear you say P-O-T-L-A-N-D.
Louder, louder.
P-O-T-L-A-N-D. A little louder. P-O-T-L-A-N-D. This is Pilot. P-O-T-L-A-N-D. why we be running block, man. Y'all should see my spot, man. Room full of hot lamps. Promise when you see these birds that you gon' be like, oh damn. Look at all these trees and my weed ain't got no seeds and it smell like tangerine. Can I have a sample, please? I'ma be like, get that pipe up on my desk. Let the sauce be you test and let the weed just go around. Thank you so very much, Colin. It's our pleasure to be here at Hempstall 2016.
This is Mr. Henry Ford in 1941 with Popular Mechanics magazine showing off his car made from hemp.
Well, come climb the mountain with me. Come see what we can see. Come climb the mountain with me, and then we will all be free. Some men are born to lead, some men have destiny. Some men plant the seed, and some men set it free.
We had 92,000 cars a day, thousands of people parking behind the FBI building, and they arrested us and they said, you cannot do this. I said, well, I'm not going to pay you a fine and go on probation. So I did 15 days in prison rather than give them a $5 fine.
Wow, that's kind of like telling Jesus you can't practice on Sunday.
It was a fine line.
So come climb the mountain with me, come see what we can see. Come climb the mountain with me, and then we will all be free.
Jack here and Ed Adair. Well, hi guys. They must be on the hemp tour. Are you on the hemp tour?
One man said we must hear. One man's voice was clear. One man heard the call. His vision speaks for all.
The #1 plant for paper, fiber, and fuel from the natural cycle had been outlawed. That somehow the synthetic cycle had won, when the #1 thing in the natural cycle could outproduce it and completely clean up the atmosphere. So my partner, Captain Ed, who had become my partner in 1973 and doing the politics of this, said we have to teach everybody in the world. So we went around and told everybody. But it was a slow process.
So come open your eyes with me, and come see what you can see. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. Come open your eyes with me. It's time for you to see. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes.
Jack Hare, the godfather of hemp movement, who really began this movement, I guess, in the early 70s, has taught us all. Jack died this last year, and I was lucky enough to be able to do his eulogy or be one of the people at his eulogy. And I made up my mind when I knew I was going to come out here, I wanted to dedicate my travel and my appearance on this show to my good friend Jack Hare, and I wrote a eulogy about him. For those of you who do not know, Jack Hare wrote The Emperor Wears No Clothes. This is the way I remember Jack Hare. Jack Hare is a social and philosophical tsunami, the ripples from whose splash will forever grace the shores of human consciousness in every freedom-loving nation. He is a grand champion of we the people and the natural cycle in our battle with the synthetic subversion which threatens the very concept of the sovereignty of each human individual. Jack's tireless efforts to eliminate the facts about cannabis have furnished freedom fighters everywhere with the tools of knowledge with which to resist the fascism of the corporate state as it seeks to subject everyone to its economic bottom line. Jack recognized that cannabis is indeed a gateway to existentialism, which enlightens our existence and is the basis of our freedom of choice. He also recognized the miraculous powers of this herb for healing, and many sick and dying people have found comfort in its use after reading his wonderful manifesto, The Emperor Wears No Clothes. I am one of them. Jack Ayer's grand spirit may have left his worn-out body, but he has entered into the hearts and minds of millions of us who will be forever grateful to have been educated by his commitment to the truth. God bless you, Jack.
Amen.
This comes in a matter, I think, of finding new ways to approach this thing.
Exactly.
Because you know, these are the, when we're talking about the stuff they do, but these are the people that created the Inquisition.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for us to be surprised by anything that they would do, then we're not being realistic and pragmatic. If some act of cruelty or stupidity or just plain old cold-bloodedness happens and we're shocked and surprised by it, then shame on us.
Exactly. Shame on
really,
us because they've
means,
been doing it for so long.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really, to me, a matter, because everything's about energy, all right? And they're focusing their energy, we can call it whether it's the hate stuff, all the destroy stuff, but they're focusing their energy in such a way, all right, that it's being effective for them. Right? But it also, because they can hit us and push emotional buttons and pull distorts out of us, then they distort our energy. You know, and so to me, I think what's really ahead of us is it's not even a matter of out-organizing them, it's a matter of out-thinking them, thinking differently, outside of their definitions. And
outside of the box.
Yeah, outside the box, because, see, we're talking about alternative energy. Because the whole marijuana thing, all of it, but really, everything is about energy. And when I look at it as, well, we are individual alternative energy sources. If we looked at ourselves as alternative energy as well as we do hemp or whatever else, you know, and understood the value of that, and then use that power of our creative intelligence, clearly and coherently, we can outthink these people. But it's not happening because we've been imprinted and wired to have these insecurities, these doubts, and these reactionary fears. So they know they can push an emotional button. So they're spending however many of these things are, half of that just put out there just to push our emotional buttons. It's not to recruit or people have been rebelling against the oppressor class since there's been an oppressor class. And I look within my own lifetime, we were young, idealistic, all our stuff. We wanted it all to be good and fair and this and that. You know, and so we did all the stuff. We went out there, we took all that out there, basically that the generations had done before in the way that they did it. And so what's missing? If our intentions are good, our motives are good, our idealism is good, and yet they stay on top of us, then what's missing? And I think what's missing is we weren't using the power of our creative intelligence clearly and coherently. See, we were just picking up old behavior patterns and organizing the same way, under the same definitions that the generation before had and the generation before had. See, we never challenged, we never approached it from the perspective of, well, maybe life is about responsibility and not freedom, because responsibility it's got a definite meaning to us, whereas freedom is an abstraction. All right? I mean, and it is, because I can say I believe in freedom, but then that means that the racist liar that lies about hemp and all these things, then what? They have the freedom to do that? If I had, you know, see, so it's an abstraction.
Right.
And we've never really approached this whole thing from the perception of responsibility. Well, we have a because if we want to be free, being free is connected to responsibility. All right? Being oppressed is connected to this abstract, illogical, all right, no definition of freedom.
Here is our show and tell, our sharing for tonight. This first thing is a specific medicine container. You see it says American hemp. It says it's great. I'll read the label. It says great for nervous depression, irritation of the genitourinary tract, painful micturition, and are used for scalding, burning, frequent low mental conditions, wakefulness. This is just recommended for just about everything, and it's got a date on the back. It says American hemp is considered an anodyne, hypnotic, antispasmodic, producing sleep even when opium and morphine fail, efficient in delirium tremens, which is what alcoholics get, infantile convulsions, and fevers, neuralgia, gout, rheumatism, low mental conditions, insanity, and inflammatory conditions. It's often preferable to opium and where opium disagrees. So that's what it says on this jar right there in tiny letters. I read it. Then this one is from a currently operating company, Park Davis. This is in solid powdered extract. And you see it has about half of the containers are still in here. This is from 1910. It says Indian Cannabis on this little label in the back. And it's a Park Davis product produced in Detroit, Michigan. It is powdered hashish, or keef we often call it, but they call it powdered extract of cannabis. Right next to it is another powdered extract of cannabis. Let's get it away from the leaf a little bit. There we go. Oh no, back the other way. There, that's better. So this one's from Eli Lilly, and I have a series of Eli Lilly products here that are going to the Cannabis Museum in Athens, Ohio here in short order. But this is a specific powdered cannabis product. Then right next to it from the Merrill Company is also a powdered extract of cannabis. All three of these jars were made to hold 1, 2, 3, an ounce of cannabis. In fact, this one even says right on the back, 1 ounce. So you can see this one's empty. This is the only one that has some of the contents in it. Right next to it here, maybe you can close in a little bit on that. This is chlorodyne. Chlorodyne was a medicine for pain and sleep, and it's also from Eli Lilly. It is cannabis, morphine, peppermint, chloroform, and caspicum. So this has a lot of different things in this chlorodyne from Eli Lilly and Indianapolis. And so it was used for pain and spasms. And so it, like I said again, it has morphine, cannabis, capsicum, chloroform. This stuff will just knock you out, basically. Then right next to it, we have another Eli Lilly product, cannabis tincture number 17. Eli Lilly, Park Davis, these guys each had over 24 different cannabis products that were slightly different in the extracting agent and the contents and concentrations. So this was their number 17 cannabis tincture. Right next to it, here we have number 96. You see it says poison. They thought it was poison for a while. This bottle is from the 1880s. They thought you could overdose on it. Well, it was 1 ounce of cannabis extract in 9 ounces of alcohol. That's what it says on there. So this is a number 96. And right here next to it, a little bigger version of number 96, again from about 1905. About 110 years old here. And so then right next to it we have one from 1870. And this one is particularly interesting. It has a label here on the back. It isn't in real good shape. This is Cannabis Indica USP. On the back of it here, it says, not poisonous according to the best authorities, though formerly regarded so. It's an antispasmodic, analgesic, anesthetic, and narcotic. It's an aphrodisiac, specifically recommended in spasmodic conditions of and painful ailments for preventing rather than treating migraines, almost a specific in that form. Insanity peculiar to women. In other words, menstrual problems. Diagnosed by mental worry or moral shock. So if you're a woman on PMS and you have mental worry or moral shock, this company thought this was the thing for you.
Like that.
It's an it goes on and says, in the best known hypnotic and delirium tremens. Again, if you're an alcoholic, this would help you get off the booze. Its anodyne power is marked in chronic metriitis and dysmenorrhea. Dysmenorrhea, again, is menstrual pains. Used with excellent results in habituates of opium, chloroform, and cocaine use. So they also recommended it to get off opium, chloroform, and cocaine. In hysterical cases, as claimed by chloral or opium, it's acting especially well. So that's what Eli Lilly said in approximately 1870. Then right next door we have this cough and cold balsam, and it is alcohol, chloroform, and antimony tart. And so it has a bottle inside, and this nifty little thing here. Here is the bottle. And so maybe we can close in on that a little bit. Then it has this insert that is actually printed in 13 different languages. You can read it in 13 languages. In case you're, newly immigrated here, this was a medicine. This is from 1885. It was produced in Pennsylvania, Plymouth, Pennsylvania. Right next to it, we have our regular hemp flame of freedom. This is hemp seed oil with a hemp wick. This is next week's wick right here, folks. And this is some raw hemp oil. And this is after we've had the hemp wick in there and burning it. This is just a little shot glass with some hemp seed oil in it, and we light it up. So this is the reason that marijuana is illegal. It's not a coincidence, I believe, that an Israeli-Canadian energy company called Adira Energy, again, you can look them up, A-D-I-R-A energy.com. This Israeli-Canadian oil company, I've been talking for years that the only reason that marijuana is illegal isn't really about drugs. It's really about money and power and the continued centralization of economic and political control. And it's specifically about energy and fiber. So these are the reasons marijuana is illegal. They don't want us to have this naturally centralized resource. They want us to have to buy it from them. Does that sound familiar to you? Anyway, here's our hemp ball of twine. And this is hempcrete. It's limestone powdered down called quicklime. And it's broken up, and it's stronger than concrete. And then this is a little hemp stock. We like hemp stocks around here, don't we, Eric?
Yes, we do. Larry.
All right. So that's the end of our show and tell for tonight.
I'm going to do a Lowell George song. It's a trucker's favorite.
One of mine, too.
All right, here we go. Warped by the rain, driven by the snow, drunk and dirty, don't you know that I'm still, Lord, I'm still. Out on the road late last night, I seen my pretty Alice in every headlight. Alice, Dallas Alice, I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, to Hatchapee to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven by the back road so would not get weighed. If you give me weed, whites, and wine, you show me a sign, I'll be willing to be moving. Kicked by the rain, driven by the sleet, had my head stoved in, but I'm still on my feet, and I'm still, Lord, I'm still. Smuggled some smoking folks from Mexico, baked by the sun every time I go to Mexico. And I'm willing, I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, to Hatchapee to Tonopah, doing every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven by the back roads so I would not get wet. If you give me weed, whites, and wine, you show me a sign, I'll be willing to be moving